Our last speaker is Sachin Lodha. Is he here? Oh, hi. So Sachin is a principal science Tata consultant service. Is part of TCS Corporate Technology Office. He and Sitaram Charmati together lead the cybersecurity research and innovation efforts within TCS. In particular, Sachin has special interest in privacy and related topics. In his efforts on that front have led to multiple research papers, patent applications, and importantly, award-winning innovations that are now available as commercial TCS products. Okay. That's you.
Hello. Yeah. So good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here. Thanks for the opportunity. So what I'm going to do is for next 20 minutes, right? For next 20 minutes, I'm going to talk about need for a completely new class of privacy controls. We call them fair usage privacy control, and explain to you some of the work we are doing, right? But before we go there, I simply want to kind of make sure that we understand what the privacy challenge is. So let's quickly look at how security and privacy are different from each other. So if you look at this picture, it's a classical man-in-the-middle attack picture. You see that there are two users who are trying to communicate, and there is an attacker who is trying to listen in, maybe tamper that communication, right? So the one simple observation we have here is that user and attacker are different. In privacy, user is also an attacker, okay? And this simple thing makes the whole problem very challenging, because in security, we all are aware of methods or controls like authentication, encryption, right? Which are designed to keep bad guys out and get good guys in. But in privacy, the good guy himself is an attacker, okay? So how do you solve this problem? So typically what happens is you have to figure out what data you should share with the user so that the privacy of data subjects is respected, but at the same time, that data has to be useful because user has to use that data, right? So we see two extremes. One extreme is you share data as is, and if you do that, you get full utility from the data, but probably no privacy. On the other hand, you might decide to share completely fictitious data with the user. You will get full privacy, but probably no utility. So we see this kind of nice tug-of-war going on between privacy and utility. And that's the grand challenge of privacy. What data you share with the user so that both privacy and utility goals are satisfied, okay? And let's be clear on this. There is a lot of research in this space. Statisticians, computer scientists for last 2-3 decades have developed several approaches and methods to tackle this problem. There is no silver bullet solution, and there are scenarios where it ultimately boils down to a business decision, whether you favor utility or privacy, okay? So let me tell you what people typically do in the practice. So there are nice theories about privacy, and one popular theory is by Gavison, and that's called blending in crowd. Okay, so if you look at this picture, you see that there are a lot of yellow faces, and which face stands out? The red one, right? The Spider-Man one, because he is different, right? So the idea is that in the data world, if you blend well, so if your data looks like data of many other people, right? In simple terms, if you are an average Joe, right, it's difficult to single out and it's difficult to violate your privacy. But if you are unique, right, then it's easy to single you out and violate your privacy. And that's what this picture is saying. So what you do when you want to provide privacy to your data is you kind of start scrubbing it, and forcefully blend people so they become indistinguishable, okay? And I'm sure all of you must have heard terms like data masking, obfuscation, right? De-identification. All these methods essentially are a kind of blender. They blend you in so that it's difficult to isolate you, and that's the only way they try to argue that now you get privacy. But understand that when this blending happens, the data is being changed. And as you change the data, the utility of data is going to suffer. So that right balance has to be found so that proper blending is taking place. At the same time, utility is not suffering a lot. Okay? So we have been doing a lot of work in this. As he nicely read in my introduction, we have, in fact, built several products that can handle data, images, audio, and try to blend in, right? So that privacy and utility goals are met. So here are some of those products. Maybe we can discuss offline if there is interest. But let me tell you how this whole practice of privacy is under big threat as we now enter this whole era of big data, social, mobility, IoT, and so on, right? So some 400 years back, Shakespeare said that all the world is stage, and we all are merely players or actors, right? And some information age guru in 80s said that the world is a database, and we are all tuples, okay? And you can see a nice tuple there in the side. Now, what's happening in the big data era is that the amount of information about each of us, right, it's constantly growing. So you can see there that the number of columns or the attributes about each of us are rapidly growing. So the variety is growing all the time. And not only that, at very high velocity, the volume is also growing, okay? So if you look at this picture, one way to think about this is now that all the world is a database, and now we are not tuples, but we are tables, okay? And this tuple to table transformation that's happening to each of us is actually bringing in serious privacy challenges. So what I want to do is I want to just quickly run you through a couple of examples to emphasize this point. So let's look at the first one. This is about autonomous cars or driverless cars, right? I don't know why the world is so crazy about them. If any of you have visited India, you would probably agree that we already have driverless cars, okay? It's difficult to imagine that some human agent is driving those cars, okay? They go crazy. But the point is, now with these driverless cars, which are connected to your GPS, satellites, mobile towers, right? They know your location all the time, okay? And there's an interesting question now that a car that knows your location all the time, can it spy on you, okay? So this is an interesting study that was done by American Civil Liberties Union, who have been fighting privacy battle in US and across the world. So let me quickly show you what they found, okay? So I hope you agree that if I just plotting that data on the Google map, I would know your location, right? And then I can start plotting this data maybe for an entire year, and I essentially know all the places you visited in the year, right? Now we are, at least I am a geek. The moment you give me a table, I will feel like firing some queries on it, okay? So let's see one interesting query. You can find out visit to a particular address, right? You agree? Yes? Now, once I have this, I would write next set of queries and try to look at top 10 places you visited in the year, okay? So let's quickly look at those rows. The first row, 348 days uniquely visited, about 13 hours spent, residential address. It's home, right? What about the next? It's 456 Commerce Street, office building. It's a workplace. What about the fourth row, the one in the red? It's again someone's private home. You have unique days visited 15. On an average, you spend 9 hours there. What it could be? Mistress, parents. It's always fun to ask this question because I've seen different cultures, different countries, people give very different answers, okay? So Japanese and Indians, they are very prude. They'll only smile. Australians are very open. They'll immediately shout mistress. I heard Ben say that. Okay. And hello?
How about Israelis?
Well, I heard mixed answers. And I know there are half Israelis here and half probably non-Israelis, so it's difficult for me to guess here. But you see that we can learn sensitive information, right, simply by having location data. Now let's make it even more interesting. We start correlating data from across different cars, okay? And we know that when friends hang out, they probably park their cars in the same parking lot or nearby location. If you start correlating data, you can start building friendship graphs, okay? And these are real friends spending real time doing some activity. So these are not your Facebook friends whom you typically accept just by courtesy, okay? These are real people. And then you start looking at this data, you can even start understanding more patterns because you know the location where they hang out. So maybe it's a sporting arena, it's a pub, it's a religious place, it's a political party's office. You can start learning their interest and affiliation, okay? So it's a big, big story. There is a link here, so later you can visit and read the whole thing, but it's very, very scary, just knowing one attribute, which is location. But the fun part is, yesterday I was reading that this story came out in 2013, 2014. Yesterday I was reading that US department that is in charge of their traffic or whatever, right, transport ministry is now going to make it a mandatory requirement that all cars, right, in plain text, announce their location and a lot of other information. And this is going to be a mandatory requirement. So just imagine now, we already know it's a huge problem. They want people to publicly announce it so that anybody can catch it, right? And do all this kind of analysis. So it's very scary, okay? This is not right. So this is what happens when you have high volume. Let me tell you what happens when you have high variety. So imagine now that we just know one attribute about people. You can see that it's very difficult to separate them out. But as we start knowing more attributes about them, right, everybody starts becoming unique, right? This is what's called curse of dimensionality. And essentially, more attributes are known, more likely that you are unique in that high dimensional space, more easy to isolate you, identify you, and attack you, okay? So we see that with high volume, high velocity, and high variety, we are seeing serious privacy challenge. Now let's come back to our grand challenge. We said that the goal is to share information so that it's both useful and privacy preserving. But what we see here is it's becoming a David versus Goliath battle, okay? So we see that organizations, right, which are essentially huge Goliath that is trying to kind of get most out of data, right? They get tremendous advantage with data. It provides them business edge. And then there is a small David, like us individuals, who want our privacy. And at the moment, we observe that David is losing, okay? David is not winning at all. And that's a worrisome thing. And if you let market forces take their course, David will certainly lose because nobody has incentive to help the David, okay? So that's where I'm very happy. We have been researching and innovating in privacy for many, many years. And we never imagined that something like GDPR will happen in our lifetime, this General Data Protection Regulation that EU has come up with. It's an amazing regulation, and I think it is trying to make David stronger, and it is trying to level the playing field, which is completely organization-centric now. So here are some quick sort of things about GDPR, right? Most important box is this. So individuals get tremendous rights, right? There is right to object to profiling. There is right to kind of be forgotten. There is right to data portability and so on. So all of these are designed so that individuals can have better and more control on their data, right? There are things like breach notification, so people have to be informed in less than 72 hours, right, about the breaches that are happening. Privacy by design, we had an entire session on that. This conference is kind of becoming most important thing. So these are all nice things, right? And now how do you go there? Because GDPR is coming into enforcement a year from now. So 25th May 2018, any organization that is processing EU citizen data has to be GDPR compliant. If you are not, fine is maximum of $20 million or 4% of your annual turnover, okay? These are huge numbers. No organization wants to pay that kind of fine. So what they want to do, right? So there are few things here that we have listed. Some of them are more of process, like do privacy impact assessment, maybe have some process to handle customer requests and so on. What I want to focus on is consent management, okay, which is very relevant. So here is a quick summary where we are. See, we realized that because of big data, it is not possible now for us to promise privacy to people simply by providing them masking-based solution. We need to do something more, and the best thing to do is to let people take control, and that's what GDPR is saying. So let's see how would we do it. So we are building a technology, we call it crystal ball, because in some sense, just like crystal ball lets you have, you can view events that are happening far out in space and time, this technology is going to help data subjects control data which is far out in space and time, okay? And what does it do? So there are two parts to our technology that we are building. Part one is intent capture, okay? And I'll show you some screenshots on how it works. So here, organization is going to publish what all personal data they have about us, right? For what different purposes they use it, and get data subjects, get their consumers, get their employees to express how their data is to be treated. So this is all intent capture. And then there is an enforcement piece. So we have developed some piece of code, some magic code that allows us to patch existing applications so that they can enforce the intent that they had captured from data subjects, okay? So let me show you quickly some screenshots which will make this more clear. So here is a portal, okay? So this portal has different roles, workflows. So what happens here is that the privacy officer can essentially define different sensitive fields, right? That have to be, for which consent has to be collected, and different purposes for which it has to be collected, okay? And then you as a normal customer of that bank or that organization can go there and you can kind of express how your data is to be handled for different purposes, okay? So that's part one, which is somewhat straightforward. The part two is, how does it work in real life? I talked about enactment, right? So here is a quick screenshots that show you how the whole thing evolves. So imagine that there is an application that bank employees use. They log into it. So moment they get to a part of the application, they are basically asked, why do you want to access this piece of information, okay? So they have to indicate the purpose for which they are trying to access that personal information, okay? And moment they express that, subsequently, only the information that the the consumer had permitted, right? So if consumer had said, it's okay for me if you share email and date of birth, that's the only piece of information that makes available. Some of the other pieces of information, right, which are treated as personal information or sensitive, remain masked, okay? This all happens real time, right, with the kind of bit of patching we do to the existing application. You don't have to change application code at all. In fact, there are some other nice features. So you can kind of issue a privacy or a data usage statement to your consumers and tell them how you have been using their data, because now you are doing very fine-grained data access tracking. It can also help you do the audit purposes, right? Because ultimately, the organization has to go through audits and demonstrate that they are doing the right things when it comes to GDPR compliance. We have an extreme version of this. So you can even get real-time consent. Okay, so we have a mobile app which can receive notifications, right? It tells you who is accessing data from where, right? And what pieces of information they need to access. You can do real-time approvals, okay? And these kind of notifications allow you to do real-time approvals, and you can see that that particular piece of information is immediately become available to the application user. Different flavors, one could use this technology. I mean, you can simply start by having the portal to capture intent and purpose. You can kind of use that to track the data access. So you can have organizational usage report. You might even think of sending personalized data usage statements to the consumers. The last two are extreme, where you can actually get mobile apps through which your consumers can interact, right? And they even might be able to do real-time consents, okay? So there are several advantages. Probably some of them are already clear, right? It's highly transparent, clearly establishes the accountability, right? Most importantly, policy has been externalized, okay? So later when your privacy policy changes, you don't have to do anything as far as deployment goes. You probably have to just redefine the policy part of it, and so on. The last but not the least, I further want to highlight that whenever we get into discussion on security and privacy, we have seen that organizations treat them as more of a cost centers, right? But here, there is a unique opportunity that if you are able to kind of provide this level of transparency, have fine-grained data tracking, you can even think of monetizing this, okay? So there is a unique monetization opportunities. So some of the conversations we are having with our customers, we are seeing that banks do want to play a role of a broker, right? As far as personal data management goes. Some are thinking of issuing those kind of data usage statements for which surveys show that people are willing to pay. There are opportunities to trade data in data marketplaces based on what value they provide. So there are interesting opportunities that open up if you are able to track how data is being used, okay? With that, I'll stop. Probably I'm in time. And if there are questions, I'm happy to take them.
I want to thank you all for staying with us this late. Our conference has a lot of talks about cyber, and this was supposed to be more technical track. If you wish to continue learning technical stuff, there is the B-Sides conference that's starting right now at Bar Shira Auditorium. So you can move to there and get a lot of other great lectures, more technical. Thank you all. Be with us next year. Thanks.